Minnesota sports fans, to another edition of Vikings on SI. Jonathan Harrison here, joined by Will Ragatz. Will, short staff today. For one, Tony and Nolan are off. Happy Friday to them. Joe is out Christmas shopping frantically, so he couldn't join us, though. We know his predictions, but it's time for our weekly Vikings predictions video. Since the Vikings are taking on the Seahawks this weekend in Seattle, a late afternoon game for that one. A big one for sure, because only 3 games left after everything that happened last week. Vikings tied at the top of the NFC North and the NFC in general for a potential number 1 seed in the conference heading into the playoffs. So obviously these last 3 games we already knew they were going to be big, but they just got bigger. So let's jump right into the predictions. Let's start off with you right off the bat. Your prediction for Vikings Seahawks this week.
Yeah, people may not like this, but I have actually picked against the Vikings this week, which I haven't done many times all year. I think maybe like 3 times or something, and at least once early in the season, I picked against them randomly in the Soldier Field game about a month ago, and I'm doing it again here. I do absolutely think that the Vikings are the better team in this matchup, to be clear, and they can completely go and win this game if they show up and play well on both sides of the ball and play like they largely have during this 7-game winning streak. There's just a few things that give me some pause. It's a tough place to win in Seattle. The Vikings haven't won there since 2006. They've lost 5 in a row there. Granted, Kevin O'Connell wasn't around for any of those. Sam Darnold, I think the last one was in 2020. But it's a tough place to go play. You throw in the fact that there's some rain in the forecast this week. That just gives me some concern about a team that has had some fumble issues at times earlier in the season. Kevin O'Connell said today that they were doing the wet ball drill. They had a bucket of water at TCO Performance Center on the practice field today, and they're dipping it and throwing it and doing center quarterback exchanges and all those things. So they'll be prepared, but the real thing is a little different. Sam Darnold threw a pick last week, had another one forced into a tough spot that could have been picked. He's been great. There's some things that give me concern. I can dive into more of them, like matchup-wise and football-wise, as we get into this video. But one of the big ones that I have to admit is just the other 4 people on our staff, you included, picked Vikings wins. And it didn't really feel right for me or for us to go 5 for 5 on the Vikings in a road game at Seattle where they're 3-point favorites. So I did that. You could even say I did it just to help the Vikings because the bad juju of everybody picking them. By the way, NFL.com, all 10 of theirs picked the Vikings. There's just something off about that to me, so I had to balance it out a little bit.
And that's fair. I mean, as superstitious as we can be as sports fans, you got to balance it out and play against those superstitions. So that's fair. I think for me, when looking at this game, you look at the injuries, the fact that Geno Smith is coming into this one banged up already, had to leave the game last week against the Packers with a knee injury. And when looking at some of the numbers this season, he has, according to Pro Football Focus, the most dropbacks under pressure this season at 210 dropbacks under pressure this season, which is just a big number for a quarterback who's already coming into this game hampered, now going up against a defense that likes to blitz, that likes to rush the passer, that's very good at hurrying the quarterback. This is going to be a tough game for Geno Smith. He's got a 64.1 passing grade against or under pressure this season, which is 5th best in the league. So it's not something that he's terrible at according to the grades. I mean, according to the rest of the league, he's thrown 11 picks, so it hasn't been good for him. Granted, he's had the most opportunities to play under pressure than anybody, so those picks are going to happen. But I just see this one going the Vikings' way. Yes, they're in Seattle. Yes, it's raining. They haven't won there in a very long time, but I want to push back on something you said. It's tough to win in Seattle. They're only 3-5 at home this season. They haven't been great in Seattle this season. That is true.
I had just looked that up before we started this video. I was like, oh, they're 8-6. They've probably been good at home and bad on the road. No, it's been the opposite. You're right.
They haven't been great at home this season, so I think they are vulnerable. I think the Vikings, they know they feel like it's a very confident team, considering they've had to win in a bunch of different ways the past couple weeks. It always hasn't been the same way that they've won week in and week out. So it feels like they're willing to roll with whatever punches are thrown at them and just find a way to win. So I have the Vikings winning this one. What did I say? 17-14. I think it's going to be close, but I have them winning. What were the other
Yeah,
predictions for the other guys?
by the way, I said 20-17 Seahawks. So I'm with you on thinking it'll maybe be a slightly lower scoring game with the weather conditions possibly factoring into that. Not everyone agreed with that. Joe's got Vikings 30, Seahawks 17. He wrote today at Vikings on SI about how Tariq Woolen had a really tough game against the Packers, Seahawks cornerback, and might have another even tougher game against Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, and also mentioning the Seattle's home record. Nolan said Vikings 27, Seahawks 24, and Tony said Vikings 31, Seahawks 28. So three of the four of us who are picking wins have it by just the spread, basically by 3 points.
Mm-hmm.
Joe a little bit more optimistic, as tends to be the case. But yeah, I think with the general consensus is this has a chance to be a pretty close game. The one thing I would say to your point is if you're making the argument in favor of the Vikings, you start with the offensive line of the Seattle Seahawks. Because that game, if you watched it Sunday Night Football against the Packers in Seattle, Geno Smith got banged up. Sam Howell comes in, and Sam Howell looked like he just had no shot out there. And some of it was certainly his fault. He threw a bad interception. He's not very good. He led the league in sacks taken and interceptions last year when he was Washington's starter. But he also was just like, he would drop back and he'd get sacked in 2.5 seconds, and he didn't have time to peruse the field because the Seahawks offensive line is really not good. Their left tackle, Charles Cross, is a very good player. He's got an 82.9 PFF grade. None of their other starters have anything, even a 65 PFF grade. It's all mediocre or bad with guys like Laken Tomlinson, Connor Williams, Anthony Bradford, Stone Forsythe. They've played a bunch of offensive linemen this year due to injuries, so I don't know off the top of my head who the five will be this Sunday. But Charles Cross is basically the only good offensive lineman. The Vikings have more than one good pass rusher. They've got Grenard and Van Ginkel. You've got guys like Jihad Ward and Pat Jones, and even Dallas Turner emerging with a really nice sack against the Bears. So that, to me, is the main argument in favor of the Vikings is what Brian Flores and this defense can do against the Seahawks offensive line. Because when you watch Sam Howell play, you get a little more appreciation for what Geno Smith has been able to overcome this season, where his box score stats don't look great this year with the touchdowns, interceptions, passer rating, those kind of things. But put into context the amount of times he's under pressure and what he's able to do and how they looked when Howell came in, and you get a little more appreciation for Smith's talent.
It certainly is going to be interesting to see how Geno Smith handles this. Is that one of your key matchups you're watching this Sunday, is how he handles that pressure of the Vikings defensive front, which they won't have Jalen Redmond, which I know he's been playing pretty well of late, so that's going to be a hit for them. But it seems like Brian Flores has been able to find pieces wherever they are this season. No matter who it is, he's been able to find success and pull success out of whoever's showing up on that defensive line. What's some of your key matchups you're watching this Sunday against the Seahawks?
Yeah, Geno Smith against Brian Flores pressure, like I just kind of talked about, that's a big one for sure. I would say in a rainy game potentially, I don't know how wet it's going to be, how much that's going to affect conditions, style of play, those things. But if it is pretty slick, you could see this being a game where teams try to lean on the running game, and that would be another key matchup to watch for me because the Seahawks are getting Kenneth Walker, the third back, after he missed a couple games. They've got Zach Charbonnet, who's been really good filling in for Walker at times. I mean, I think they're two of the best running backs in the league this year when you look at things like tackles, missed tackles forced, yards after contact, things like that. They're both quite good. And the Vikings' run defense has been a little bit suspect without Ivan Pace Jr., who's on injured reserve. And it sounds like he might return next week against the Packers, but this is his fourth game, not eligible to play this week. So that would be a key matchup for me to watch. If the Seahawks can really control the time of possession and move the chains and pick up chunks with the running game, I mean, like we say every week, that if you can do that, that is one way to kind of mitigate some of the pressure that Brian Flores can put on you when you're not just able to kind of pin your ears back as a pass rush. So that would be another one. I think, you look at the receivers Seattle has, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. It's up there with the best trios in the league. So the Vikings who are getting Stephon Gilmore back, Byron Murphy, Shaq Griffin. Those guys have to play well when Geno Smith has enough time to get the ball out. And then on the other side of the ball, I think the Vikings just have to take care of the football. Sam Darnold, play well, find Justin Jefferson, find Jordan Addison, get Aaron Jones involved. The Seahawks have a solid defense. It's actually, if you look at DVOA, they're 18th overall this year, but they're 20th in offense and 11th in defense. So borderline top 10 defense this year. You got Leonard Williams is just a monster in the middle who, as we've talked about a lot this season, those interior defensive linemen can give Garrett Bradbury and the Vikings some trouble. And then you got guys off the edge like Derek Hall, Boye Mafe, the former Gopher, and then pieces on the back end too. Julian Love, their safety. I mean, Tariq Woolen, who we talked about earlier, he's struggled at times, but he's also played well at times. Devon Witherspoon, another solid cornerback. They've got a few guys on this defense. Ernest Jones, the linebacker they got from the Rams, who Kevin O'Connell's familiar with. He's a pretty good player. So the Vikings have to continue to do what they've done on offense, get everybody involved, ideally protect Darnold, and then it'll come down to Darnold's got to play a little better, I think, in this game than he did against the Bears, because the Seahawks are not a great team, but they're also not the Bears, and the Vikings are on the road this week. So Darnold's got to bounce back a little bit, and I think there's a solid chance that he does.
You mentioned getting Stephon Gilmore back, who's missed the past 2 games. Fabian Moreau filled in for him pretty well, I would say, over the past 2 games. Now he's out with an injury this week.
Yep.
What's the importance of getting Gilmore back in that defense, and how will he affect what the defense is able to do on Sunday?
Yeah, it's big. I mean, Gilmore is one of their starters for a reason. He's not by any means the player that he was when he's winning Defensive Player of the Year in 2019, but he's been really reliable and solid this season, and has been for the last several years. Even though he's on like his 5th team in 5 years, he's just kind of the hired veteran gun cornerback who just shows up and will play solid ball for you. So brings a higher floor than I would say Fabian Moreau does, who was their 4th guy for a reason. Now, yeah, like you mentioned, Moreau is out, so Dwight McGlothern probably in line as the 4th guy if something were to happen, if Gilmore were to aggravate his hamstring or another of the top 3 had to miss time. But yeah, it's nice to have your top 3 corners healthy in a matchup against one of the top receiving trios in the league. And we'll see if Byron Murphy can get back to get another interception this week against an NFC West team that he's pretty familiar with.
I know Harrison Smith popped up on the injury report. I know he's been on there a couple times for rest-related things, but this one seemed a little bit more serious considering the foot designation. I believe it was the foot, right, that he was designated for the injury. What's the impact if he can't go on Saturday? How does that change what the Vikings like to do and Brian Flores likes to do on that defensive side, where they move pieces around, move pieces in and out? If Harrison Smith can't go, how does that affect what the Vikings are able to do in the backfield?
Yeah, it would be a tough loss. I think they'd have to lean on Theo Jackson a little more alongside Cam Bynum, Josh Metellus. I don't expect Harrison Smith to miss this game. Just from listening to Kevin O'Connell talk today, he's gotten rest days. He's 35 years old in his 13th season. I don't think this was truly that on Thursday because of he's listed with a foot injury. Now he's listed as questionable, so it's a little bit more than just that. But also, I do think maybe that the questionable designation and the day off are partially just the Vikings being cautious with one of their oldest and most important players. It sounded to me from hearing Kevin O'Connell talk like Smith is probably going to play. He hasn't missed a game since 2022. So I would expect him to go, but if he can't for whatever reason, they do really like Theo Jackson as their number 4 safety. So that would be one. And then CJ Ham is the other guy who's questionable on the injury report. Sounds like he's also probably going to play despite a little ankle soreness. He generally plays like 15 to 20 snaps a game on offense, so it wouldn't be devastating if they don't have him, but they do like to use those packages with Ham to run the ball and sometimes put him in as kind of an extra pass protector on passing downs.
Looking forward to it. Should be an exciting game. 3 games left in the season. Vikings at 12-2, tied with the Lions and Eagles atop the NFC, tied with the Lions for the NFC North, which that will certainly come down to the final week, I would imagine, Week 18 at Detroit. But exciting times for sure. An intense game coming up this weekend. We'll have all the coverage for you over on Vikings on SI. Go read all of our coverage of Minnesota sports over on Vikings, Twins, Timberwolves, and Gophers on SI, covering it for you all. Be sure to hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. It does help us get found. Also notifies you every time we post a new video here on the Bring Me the Sports YouTube channel. We'll talk to you again later this weekend, coming up with another topic across Minnesota sports. Talk to you then.